Just want to give a little video on the landscape in terms of board director appointments, what trends I'm seeing, what I'm noticing in the market. I've been operating in this space for nearly 2 decades. I've been recruiting at C-suite and board director level for many, many years now, conducted thousands upon thousands of board searches. So I've got a good handle of what we've seen, what trends we're now noticing, and how the landscape is shifting. Now, I've said this to a number of people I've spoken to recently. The talent pool has exploded. It doesn't mean the quality of the talent pool has exploded, but there are a lot more people now wanting to pursue board directorships. And, in the old days, I'd sort of estimate, there was a talent pool up and down the East Coast of a few 100,000, and now you could kind of treble those numbers. When we put an ad up, we get hundreds and hundreds of applicants. I know on the AICD job board, sometimes they get 600 plus applicants for each job role. That's because there's a lot of people in the market that are, wanting to serve on boards. Some of them have the qualifications to do so, but many of them are sort of aspiring board directors. So there's a lot more noise in the market, if you like. Your peak body, like your AICD, I think their membership would be approaching the sort of 45,000 or 50,000 sort of mark. There's a lot of people that are in this market that would love to serve on boards. Now, what that means is when you go to apply for boards, you're in a highly competitive sort of situation. And so you have to be really crystal clear on where you would add the most value. You've got to get your value proposition right. You've got to get your personal branding right, because otherwise you just won't even get in the door. And then you've got to augment that with networking. Increasingly, we're seeing the networking be a little bit more sort of scattered across the market. So, people who want to serve on boards are kind of ill-advised to go to where the usual suspects go. So by that I mean the AICD, the Women on Boards, those types of events are full of other people that want to be on board. So that's not necessarily the place you go to network to secure board seats. So we're seeing the networking now be quite fragmented, and post-COVID we're seeing a lot more online approaches being made to try and build rapport, to try and establish connection to secure board seats. That has really risen in the last few years, and we're seeing a lot more emphasis of board directors being on LinkedIn. And the ones that aren't on LinkedIn are typically deliberately trying to stay off LinkedIn because they don't want to be contacted, which is a bit ironic because when you're a board director, you should be fairly transparent, available and accessible. But there is a small cohort of people that are sort of trying to stay a little bit under the radar and make it quite hard to get in contact with them. But for the vast majority, most board directors now, 85% plus, would have some form of a LinkedIn profile. And you'll see increasingly on LinkedIn, they're saying what type of boards they're serving on. You'll see what type of boards they want to serve on in the future. This is coming into the mix more and more. So I sort of liken it to a bit of a renaissance on LinkedIn because, originally when I started recruiting, it was hard to even find anyone on LinkedIn that was a board director. So it has definitely shifted. There's definitely a new paradigm, if you like, in terms of skill-based appointments. There's been a recognition that the old type of appointments, the old school type appointments, which were typically accountants and lawyers, don't always make the very best board directors. And we're seeing an increasing desire to bring different skills to the table. But here's the kicker. Yes, you might have a hot skill. A hot skill might be something like cyber security. You will only get a seat at the table if you can still address the other core components of board director work, which is legal, finance, governance, and the like. So you've got to bring this to the table as a hot skill on top of having other quality commercial experience that will then enable you to serve in the boardroom. Because otherwise you'll get appointed as maybe an advisory board member, an advisor to the board of directors, or appointed maybe to a committee, but you're you're not going to serve in the board of directors itself. So hot skills are super important, and we're seeing a huge demand. And nowadays, when I take a brief from a client is so much more educated than ever before. And they'll say to me, oh, I want this, 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 this. They really do give you a shopping list of requests when they're looking for a new board director. I had a briefing the other day from a mining organisation, and the individual was the major shareholder who was briefing me. And, the requirements were really specific. I need them to have this type of relationship in China. I need them to have this type of relationship in Indonesia. They need to have had this type of experience. They need to be, able to do this, this, and this for our company. So it's fascinating, but the briefs are getting more and more specific, and the choice is there. I'll be frank, you will find 10 of what's on that shopping list quite easily if you've got a good database. So the reality is it's incredibly competitive to secure roles. It has never changed. Board recruitment always comes down to introductions. They can happen behind closed doors, or they can happen through recruiters, executive search firms like myself. But the vast majority of appointments will happen through connections, knowing people, and so on. The other fundamental that never shifts is that your reputation is all important. And if you have had poor relations in the past, if you've had any form of difficulty in your corporate life or challenges, maybe corporate mistakes, that will all come to bear when you go to try and secure board seats. It really is knockout punches, where that's concerned. So you have to have a stellar reputation. You have to have a lot of people prepared to vouch for you and speak on your behalf, to back you into these appointments. These appointments never come about simply because you applied and you got an interview and you got a board seat. That is not how this game works. So I certainly am seeing the whole market transform. The other key point I'd make is there's a surge in professionalism. So the people who are in the game seriously, who are wanting to serve on multiple board seats, they're better educated than ever before. They're better qualified. They're much more likely to have university degrees, relating to governance. They are actively studying governance on a regular basis. They are not, resting on their laurels. They're well educated, they're well networked, and they really are thought leaders in the market. They're sharing their thought leadership. So the next gen, if you like, the next generation of these board directors are coming through incredibly powerfully, because they are really setting the bar much higher maybe than ever before. Now, the old boys club, yeah, it still exists to a certain extent, and it certainly does exist in the ASX appointments, but the fundamentals still remain. I still have complete faith that the vast majority of board appointments that happen in the market happen based on merit. And yes, you've got to have the fundamentals right. You've got to have the right connections. You've got to have the right introductions and everything like that. But if you don't have the right skills, qualifications, experience, it'll fall over at some point during the recruitment process. So there are no shortcuts. The fundamentals remain, and that's good because that keeps the standards high. I think the work overall has become more challenging and more complex than ever before. I think the expectations of board directors is off the charts in some instances. I think the time commitment is off the charts in some instances. I was speaking to a board director the other day. Granted, their organisation was going through an incredibly significant legal event. They were under scrutiny. They had 120 board meetings in 1 year. So, it's not uncommon now for just regular business as usual boards to be having, between the board meetings and the committee meetings, those meetings are up to 30, sometimes 40 meetings a year. So, the time commitment's going through the charts, the legal responsibility is through the charts. So there's no real room in the market for amateurs. You've really got to, if you're going to work in this space, you're going to work at it extremely hard, and you're going to deserve the rewards that you're going to get. So the remuneration is substantial. There's no doubt about it. There is definitely a pathway towards very significant remuneration, but it needs to be well remunerated because it's complex work. work, it's challenging work. So I'm sort of seeing the whole landscape evolve. We're at an important pinnacle, though, in time, because, the whole AI industrial revolution, Mark 3, 4, 5, whatever we want to call it, whatever's about to happen with artificial intelligence, Web 3.0, the changing technology landscape, we're going to see a paradigm shift that we've never seen before. And I think a lot of boards will be caught flat-footed. I think they'll be caught flat-footed on technology. I think they'll also be caught flat-footed on ESG reporting, which is, really coming in, loud and strong. And, the reality is it's going to be very hard to get funded if you don't have good ESG, good governance practices across your organisation, even for relatively modest companies. So there's a lot happening. And so it really does require, you can't appoint amateurs to your boardroom. You must appoint the best of the best. And then my final point is around just the board search landscape. We've had a sort of a group of 5, major executive search firms. They typically have board search as an adjunct to their executive search practice. The feedback I get across the market is, it's a bit tired. The same old people turn up on the list. And that's why companies like mine, Tiger Boards, are surging, because, there's an opportunity here for fresh, nimble board search practices to do incredibly well. And, so you've got to think about it in a range of ways. Not only are we getting the very best talent to the table, but how are we sourcing that talent? Who's presenting us with the long lists, the short lists? We need to think differently about the caliber of the people in our boardroom. And I think it's going to be really important that you're conducting these very frank and fearless conversations with yourselves. Where are you at as a board of directors? Because you're not going to be able to afford to carry passengers. You're not going to be able to, roll ahead with, a few B-grade players in your boardroom, people who aren't committed, people who aren't really rolling the shirt sleeves up, because it's hard, tough work. And you need everyone equally, contributing to those organisations, and maybe fresh talent needs to be recalibrated into your boardroom to give you the right mix to deal with the challenges that we're going to face over the next few years in business, in technology, with artificial intelligence coming into the market and so on. So interesting times, definitely, lots of change happening. More change has happened in the last couple of years than I've ever seen in the board director market. And of course, I'm predicting in the next 2 years, we're going to see another radical change in the landscape. So it's evolving. It's interesting. It's fun. There's a lot of fun elements to it, but you can't get away from the fact that it's serious, important work. And we really do need the next generation of board directors to step up and serve in the boardrooms.